Well, so Anna, thank you so much for joining us today to help us really dig into the weeds of what are the top questions before knee replacement surgery.
Hi, Axel. Thanks very much for inviting me today and giving me this opportunity to share a bit about my research.
No, absolute pleasure, absolute pleasure. So before we sort of go into your research and the questions as you've tackled them, just sort of maybe give us a quick little introduction to who you are and what's brought you here, so to speak.
So I'm a physiotherapist by background, and I'm currently doing a PhD which is looking at preoperative care for people having total knee replacement surgery. And I'm fortunate to have funding for my PhD from the National Institute for Health Research, or NIHR as it's often known, and that's a sort of research arm of the NHS. But just to flag up at this stage that anything I say is very much my own view, so I'm not representing the views of the NIHR, NHS or Department of Health and Social Care.
I think that's important to say, and looking forward to hearing what you've discovered so far and where we're up to in terms of really getting a sort of in-depth academic understanding of something that I guess many of those who may be watching this video now have either experienced or are experiencing in terms of the common questions, uncertainties, and things that sort of bubble up at different stages of preparation, and I guess also following on from that, recovery from knee replacement surgery. But yeah, then so really in terms of more of the background to the project and what it involves, do you want to cover a little bit more about how that's being put together?
Yeah, so I guess the background to my project is firstly that we know preoperative care is really important for people waiting for knee replacement. And that's always been the case, but I guess even more so now with the increasing waiting times.
Mm-hmm.
And preoperative care includes education about things like what to expect and how to prepare for surgery. And ideally, it also includes an exercise program for people to do while they're waiting for surgery to help people get as fit as possible before their operation. And that's because we know that the fitter people are before surgery, the better they're likely to recover after surgery. At the moment, though, we know that preoperative care does vary really widely across the UK. So some people receive really quite a lot of support, whereas others receive very little preoperative care. We also know that although there is some evidence and research about preoperative care, there are quite a lot of gaps in the current evidence base. So, for example, we don't know necessarily what the best types of exercise are to include in preoperative exercise programs. Or what the best sort of ways are of delivering preoperative care. Having said that, we do know that using digital tools, so things like the JointSchool app or websites, it's a sort of promising approach for delivering preoperative care, and that's due to a lot of factors. For example, we can make digital tools really widely accessible, and we also know that they're really good for making sure we deliver the right care, but also at the right time. That might be more difficult with sort of face-to-face approaches. So sort of based on that, my project has various different stages. So the first stage is around developing a set of recommendations about what preoperative care should include and also how that care should be delivered. And we've now finished that first stage. The rest of the stages are all really focused on developing a sort of interactive website that will provide preoperative care to patients who are waiting for knee replacement. And that will have some sort of similarities with the JointSchool app, but what we're sort of mainly interested in focusing on is carrying out a lot of sort of in-depth research into exactly what the website and other sort of digital tools should include, and also how we can make sure that they're sort of accessible and sort of engaging for a wide variety of different people who might be having a knee replacement.
Yeah, interesting. And it's also interesting what you say about how what you said about how preoperative exercise and support around that will vary quite significantly across the country. And I guess as with everything, that's probably something that with COVID-19 has also become more difficult to enable and to support. And again, you know, while not being full replacements, digital tools may be able to bridge some of that gap. Such as with the JointSchool app, but also other things. And I think it's really great that your work will help to set some kind of gold standard for digital tools and for patient information before surgery. Yeah, that's really interesting. And so you're saying that you're kind of moving through the first stage of the research. And so what have you found so far in terms of what the key questions are for people who are getting ready for a knee replacement?
So the first stage was really focused on developing this set of recommendations about what preoperative care should include, and also how that care should be delivered. So we sort of had two separate parts to the first stage. The first involved sort of looking at previous research to find out what had been investigated previously and use that to develop a sort of initial set of recommendations. And then the second part was around converting that sort of initial set of recommendations into a more sort of final set of recommendations. And to do that, we used an approach that's sort of known as a Delphi consensus technique. And this is basically where we asked a group of 30 patients and 30 professionals to complete a series of 3 online questionnaires. And we asked them to rate how important they felt each of the initial recommendations was. And we also gave them the opportunity to suggest new recommendations that hadn't really come up in previous research. And as part of this process, we also provided the participants with summaries of the responses from the previous questionnaire. And the idea is that that encourages people to sort of reconsider their response and helps reach agreement about what recommendations are most important. So we sort of used the findings of that study to develop a final set of recommendations. And that set of recommendations includes all the recommendations that at least 70% of the participants felt were important or very important in the last questionnaire. And the recommendations cover quite a range of areas, including education topics, how education should be delivered, what types of exercise we should include in preoperative exercise programs, how those exercise programs should be delivered, and then also other treatments that could be helpful to include in preoperative care. So that's things like weight management programs and psychological therapies.
Okay, interesting. And what were the topics that most people found most relevant?
So there are actually an awful lot of topics. So we ended up including 34 education topics in our final list of recommendations. And there was a lot of agreement between the patients and professionals. So most patients and professionals felt these topics were very important. There were a huge range of topics, but most related to preparing for surgery, understanding what to expect, and recovery following surgery. Although there are a few that were more sort of background topics, so things like health conditions that might contribute to needing a knee replacement, or things like healthy lifestyle changes such as weight management, physical activity, and stopping smoking.
Okay, interesting. And you also mentioned that you did how far have you gone in terms of exercises? Because I know that's something that also varies quite a lot, from site to site, and of course it can be difficult because there's a challenge there, because often exercise plans will often need to be tailored to the individual. So how have you gone about putting together sort of general recommendations for pre or indeed even post-operative exercises, and how far have you come with the findings around that so far?
So we were very much focused just on the preoperative exercises, and what we decided was, rather than going into detail about sort of a specific exercises, we'd just look at different exercise types. So we have a set of recommendations around what types of exercise preoperative exercise programs should include, and then also we looked at various factors related to delivering the exercise programs. And this was quite an interesting area, so there was certainly more variation between the views of patients and professionals. So we included 10 exercise types in our final list of recommendations. And these included things like leg strengthening exercises and balance exercises. But there were 2 exercise types that actually we found overall the professionals felt were important, but there were fewer patients who felt they were important. And those were cardiovascular exercises, so things like swimming, cycling, brisk walking, and also core control exercises, so things like Pilates type exercises. And there was one exercise type, which was arm strengthening exercises, that actually we found patients felt were more important compared to health professionals. But we didn't end up including arm strengthening exercises in our final list of recommendations because it wasn't rated highly enough sort of overall across all the participants.
Right, okay, interesting. And you also mentioned other treatments that might be helpful before surgery. Is there sort of a top list of things that you've arrived at so far?
So we only actually ended up including 2 other treatments in our final list of recommendations, and both these treatments were rated as important by more professionals compared to patients. So the first sort of recommendation in this area was that patients who have a BMI of 27 or over should be referred to a weight management program.
Okay.
And I think it's probably a slightly controversial recommendation because a BMI of 27 is in the overweight range rather than the obese range. But we do know that weight loss is certainly something that really can help improve people's knee symptoms, and there are obviously a huge number of other benefits to weight loss as well.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. And yeah, and of course, it's fascinating with the physics of human motion that, you know, one kilo or a pound of excess weight can translate into that multiple times over as a factor on the knees in certain movements. So it really can make a big difference. So I guess that, yeah, there's some reasoning around there that makes sense. And in terms of the sort of the target audience, so to speak, how do you make sure that you're capturing sort of a wide enough representation of, you know, what knee replacement patients believe? Because it's such a wide group of people, and we're seeing, you know, knee replacements now being performed on increasingly younger people and also older people with better anesthetic support and everything. So it's becoming a wider range of people from different walks of life and different ages. And how have you gone about trying to capture that in as best way possible?
So although not for the sort of first stage of my project, for the later phases, we're using an approach to sort of select participants. It's called purposive selection, and basically that means that we try to make sure we include people who have a range of different characteristics. So we were making sure we include people of a range of different ages, of a range of different confidence levels in using the internet, making sure we include both males and females. And also for some of the phases, we're including people who are waiting for surgery and also people who've had surgery. So again, we want to make sure we include a balance of those 2 groups.
Okay, interesting. And what else will be within the sort of the next steps of your project?
So the next steps are really focused on developing this sort of interactive website, and we're calling that the Virtual Knee School. And we're using a sort of well-established approach to develop the Virtual Knee School, and it's called an evidence, theory and person-based approach. And what that sort of basically means is that we'll develop it using the findings of the Delphi study that we've just discussed. We'll also use theory, which is sort of ideas about what affects people's behaviour. And then we'll also carry out a lot more sort of in-depth research with people who are waiting for surgery or who've had knee replacement surgery to explore what they think of what should be included in the Virtual Knee School and how we can improve it.
It's really interesting. So you mentioned about like what affects people's behavior, and that's something that, you know, it can get quite complex, but can have quite interesting effects. Just a few small changes in terms of how something is put together or formulated. And so, what have you found, and what do you think will drive how people who are getting ready for a knee replacement operation will engage with this resource that you're putting together, with this website, or indeed any kind of patient information resource?
So that's sort of what we explored in the second stage of the project, which is actually a phase that we've just completed. And this involved carrying out group discussions to explore what we encourage them to use, prevent them from using it. So in terms of certainly around things that might encourage people to use a website or access preoperative education, we found generally people were really motivated to do so because they wanted to prepare for surgery, they wanted to understand what to expect. And actually one of the main barriers to people accessing preoperative education was just that they maybe weren't provided with as much information as they'd like, or they didn't receive it as long enough before the surgery as they wanted to.
Right. Okay.
We'd also sort of identify quite a few barriers that might prevent people sort of accessing the education or using a website. And those were around things like not wanting to find out detailed information about the surgical procedure, especially if that involved things like graphic details of surgery. So things like a video of the surgical procedure. We found a few people felt that was helpful to understand how much pain they were in post-operatively, but the majority of people were very against that.
Yeah, and of course, and therein lies the challenge, right? Because some people will really want to know and will really want to be able to have a clear image of almost every single step in the surgical process, whereas others will be very much sort of not wanting to get into the gory details, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so on a similar token, then, in terms of so that was some of the points around engaging with information, but in terms of exercise, what do you think might drive how people engage with and what motivates people to do exercises before surgery? And I guess that'll also relate to your finding around weight management.
Yeah, so that was another area we explored, and we found very much again people were motivated to carry out pre-operative exercises, and that was mainly due to them wanting to sort of do everything that they could to improve their post-operative recovery. There were the other factors as well that might sort of encourage people to manage to sort of start an exercise program and also sort of carry it on longer term. And those included things like setting goals, monitoring their exercise levels, and also receiving support from other people who maybe had a knee replacement or waiting for knee replacement. And again, we found there were a lot of similarities when it comes to things like weight management. Again, we found things like monitoring eating habits and things like that was generally something people thought would be helpful.
Right. Okay, interesting. Yeah, because I've seen recently there's been increasing evidence for the value of sort of shared experiences and sort of I think people will often go to sort of an authoritative source of information, and I think when you're booked in for surgery, really that's your surgeon and the wider clinical team. But I think there's sort of like a different flavor or tone of information, if you will, where people are increasingly looking at the YouTube videos and people sharing their experience of having a knee replacement on Instagram and Twitter and blogs and so on, and that's really becoming kind of like a new library of information that I think that I know a lot of people are finding really helpful. And I guess there's an interesting thing there about tapping into the shared experience and that kind of peer-to-peer exchange of experience.
Yeah, that was something that certainly came out in our research as something people generally find incredibly helpful for encouragement, just hearing other people's experiences, getting information that's maybe not provided through their hospital. But we did also have a few people flag up that it's important not to make comparisons with other people. Everybody is so different. And also we found that people were very reluctant to hear what they called sort of horror stories of knee replacement surgery. So we also, if we're including things like that, we need to be sort of sensitive to the fact that people might have concerns. So what suits for one person might not suit for somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was about finding that balance and recognizing risks and complications. And yeah, it's a fine balance between all the different aspects. And in terms of getting that right, what have you found so far? Sort of the main barriers to as a patient, as someone getting ready for an operation, not quite maybe engaging and maybe not quite becoming informed enough, or with the exercises not really getting there, or not really finding the motivation or the opportunity or the ability to do that.
So I think a lot of factors, again, some of them individual, some of them quite commonly occurring. So the lack of access to things like the information, people not getting guidance about what exercises to perform or how to sort of attempt to lose weight was a major factor. Also, we know obviously if people are on the waiting list for a knee replacement, they're probably going to have severe pain, may well have a lot of stiffness, and those can be real barriers to doing exercises preoperatively. But obviously there's ways we can help address that through things like non-weight bearing exercises, so swimming or doing exercises in sort of a sitting or lying position. There are also barriers around things like maybe being really busy or forgetting to exercise, and that's the sort of thing that we can address through things like providing the option of sending email reminders or things like that.
Okay, interesting. Well, so this has been a really interesting overview of the key sort of putting together this like and helping people navigate what is, you know, what can be quite a scary thing for many. So it's a big operation and it can feel uncertain, and I guess especially now in the circumstances of COVID-19, perhaps even more so. And so really it's going to be a key thing of helping people navigating the different steps of preparation and then looking at, you know, onwards into the early stages of recovery and so on. So thank you so much for joining us to help us get an idea of how that's being put together and perhaps where the kind of the standards should be set. Is there anything else you want to add before we sort of round off this session?
I think we've covered it. Thank you.
All right, super. Well, thanks very much, Anna, and all the best with the PhD and the next steps of the research. And as ever, to everyone out there watching this, you know, let us know in the comments below what you thought of the video. Has it sparked any more questions, any more topics for us to dig into? And of course, hit the subscribe button. And if you'd like, also take a moment to track your progress in the Joint School app, or check it out and download it if you haven't yet. So many thanks, everyone. All the best and take care.